We are delighted to be joined by Jaime from Huawei. How are you doing today?
Today is a great day. We always like to come to games events because we find this industry very lively. There's a lot of innovation, a lot of passion, and clearly among our favorite verticals that you can see in innovation.
Well, it's been really nice to come back to events full stop after the last few years, and I understand you've done a talk earlier, is that right?
Correct. Today we made a talk based on a need that we see from many developers, and it's the struggle with the saturation of the mainstream distribution channels, and many of them start to look at alternative app stores like App Gallery, and they would like to understand better how it works, how to succeed in these stores. So we made a dedicated talk today, yes.
It's interesting because when we talk to developers, we hear one of the big challenges is visibility, is getting your apps noticed, precisely because there are so many around and the App Store is saturated. And you're finding that from your side of the page as well?
Well, the thing is, if you as a store are meant to have all the books of the world, it is very difficult to find one specific book. But if your positioning is different and you only want to have the quality books of the world, then suddenly it's much easier to surface the one you're looking for. So in that sense, that could be a difference between Huawei and other stores. We are not interested in having every content and every clone game from others, but more on those who provide value to the users, which translates into engagement, which means we are demanding into the content that comes into App Gallery, and our users appreciate it. As such, we create a trust connection with the user, and our recommendations have a much higher click-through rate, if you want to measure it with attribution marketing. And we grow a very healthy relation with the users that translates into a big engagement with the content of our store.
It can be very tricky, especially when it comes to things like curation, like choosing the right apps that you want to be pushing versus other ones. I know that Google Play was seen as something of the Wild West when it first came out, and anyone could publish anything, whereas Apple has always had their kind of walled garden, very strict, very curated approach. Yes. Is that something that you feel, how do you feel Huawei tackles that differently from the other two?
So there is something fundamentally different between any other app store from the major ones and Huawei App Gallery. Those stores, they base mostly their recommendation on banners in the store, because that is the inventory they have in the phone. Google Play lives in the phones of others mostly, Samsung, Xiaomi, and so on. Huawei doesn't have Google Play, but all others, they do. So it has to advertise the content inside that environment, inside the games and the App Store. Huawei owns the full ecosystem. So it means that our AI detects what is the best, the optimal slot at the right time for the user to see the right ad. Maybe they are browsing with Huawei browser, maybe they receive a push notification, but it is different windows optimized for the best conversion rate. As such, we for example, as a consequence, we have a CPI 26% lower than the Android average in our platform. It means that developers don't need to spend so much to capture the user. And our eCPM, what publishers get out of our games, is 20% higher than the Android average, which means that publishers can monetize much better because of that engagement we create with the users. So all in all, to summarize, we are creating not a store, but an environment, an ecosystem connected that provides, among other things, apps and games.
Well, we've been living through unusual times. You talk about like reducing the cut that's taken, and of course the pandemic, changed a lot of things and affected everybody in many ways, but specifically end users found themselves maybe struggling, losing jobs, less money available, and now we've got this kind of global economy which seems to be a little bit teetering, and times are kind of hard for a lot of people. So have you noticed a change in the last few years of like the behavior of users or the behaviors of those who are trying to publish apps and what they're asking for? Has that changed over the last few years?
So the behavior of user is changing in many different dimensions. The first one is that the smartphone is no longer the king of the Christmas gifts. Smartphone market is topping up, and we know that very well because we sell phones, which means that people keep their phones for longer and they start to focus on other windows. Smartwatches are picking popularity. The PC and the tablets are picking popularity since the pandemic due to the remote working picking up and the trend of assisted remote classes, etc. That is the beauty of having an ecosystem of services and devices interconnected. App Gallery recently launched in PCs, in Windows PCs, which means that you can play your favorite mobile games from App Gallery into your Windows laptop. But the developer doesn't need to make any extra effort. The game runs on Android inside the Windows laptop. We have done all the effort. So in that sense, we are adapting to the new trends that the users are requesting. You can play music apps in our watches directly without bringing the phone with you, for example. So all that enables a better connection with the user that don't need to be depending on only one platform, one screen. There are changes that we see on that. Another change is that the multiplayer connectivity keeps growing. So people already before there were communities and there were people playing online and having friends online that never met face to face. I think with the normalization of the video conferencing, this has even multiplied compared to before. So we see sometimes in games, we see people falling in love when they play multiplayer games, and then that translates into the real life and not the other way around. So yes, I think normalization of the digital environment is something, it's a reality.
I think people are a lot more familiar with it, a lot more comfortable, and a lot of their social life has moved into that territory.
Correct.
Which has changed the way that people treat, I guess, their data as well, because
yes.
Previously it was a much more easy thing to take and collect, and I think people maybe didn't realize quite what they were putting online, and also the value of what
yes.
they were putting online.
Yes.
And that value has become basically what the industry runs on
yes.
these days. And with GDPR coming in and changing the field a little bit, how has that impacted you over at Huawei?
So the question is very good for one reason. We are absolutely customer-centric, which means that when we designed our ecosystem, it was already privacy by design. It means that when GDPR came in, we barely had to change anything. And then we see other ecosystems having issues with that. Huawei had zero issues with GDPR since the start, because we did it to be already respectful with privacy. To give you an example, we have our own search engine, which is called Petal Search. It is incognito by default. Our own maps service, which is Petal Maps, it's incognito navigation. We don't want to track anyone. We don't care where you live. If you want, you can store your location, but it is not how we get the data. We get data not based on your personal information, but on your preferences. So as a consequence, our ads are not spam. They are trusted recommendations, which makes the CPI or much better, the click-through rate really strong. It's like a trusted friend that would say, why don't you try this game? You would listen to that rather than a spam saying, this game is good, out of the blue in the middle of an article that you're reading. Because the problem for developers when that happens is that yes, people might eventually download your game, but probably many of them would never open it. So CPI only gives you the first step of the funnel, which is getting the game into the hands of the user. But the activation of the game is what brings the magic. And that is difficult to achieve in non-integrated channels like ours.
So if you were kind of already, I guess, equipped to deal with that kind of change from the outset, it hasn't had a huge impact. What does the end of 2022 and then 2023 look like for Huawei? What do you have to look forward to, or what changes are you planning to implement in the future?
So what we are focusing on is on value proposition for the users. For example, as a developer, if you have your game on Google Play and just bring it to App Gallery and ask us to promote it, the first question we would ask is, okay, what is the story to tell? If the story is, well, this game was here, now it's here. It's not a good story. But if the game comes with something special, there's a special character skin collection, or there is some in-game coins for those who open the game, suddenly you are going down the funnel of activation. And for us, it's much easier to convince the user to play your game if there's a story. Imagine you receive a notification saying, great game, play. Or 20 euros in-game gift for you today. Which one would you click faster? So that's what we mean with story. And it doesn't cost you any money because it's in-game virtual currency. But it's a story for the user, brings value, makes it viral. Influencers or YouTubers or streamers, they would talk to the community about it, and suddenly you're creating a halo effect around something that barely costs you anything. And that is, I think, what we are focusing on, the real value to the users and avoiding spamming with clone stories that don't have insights.
Sure. Well, you've already spoken today, and it's given you a chance to, I guess, sort of interact directly with the global community, which is the whole point of these things. After 2 years of Zoom conferences and all of the rest of it, what do you feel are the differences or benefits or things you notice when you come to real physical events?
The real-time interconnectivity, the non-verbal language is amazing. So while during my speech there were some questions, I could immediately see who was interested, who was going to follow up after our speech and talk to us, because you can perceive easier how the trust grows if the people are near you than through a conference screen. In that sense, that is one of the reasons why Huawei decided to split our team into all the European countries. We have people on the ground in any major country, not everyone in an ivory tower in one headquarter, because people need to meet. They need to be face-to-face to gather the trust. As an example, when a developer has issues and they contact another major store, usually they get sometimes a bot answer or a human answer some hours later from another continent. We send physical people to the offices of the developer to debug sitting on the same table, no matter where you're based. So that kind of premium treatment, we heard from developers of the size of Playrix, for example, they have never seen anything like that. They said, well, maybe the volume of traffic is not the same as in Google Play, for example, as a matter of massive volume. But the value of each user is very interesting, and the effort to come to the platform is very low because of the support we receive, the constant help. Another example to illustrate, many ad networks basically allow you to bid and win the exposure. We are an ad network and an agency. We will design the campaign with you. We'll say, well, your game works very well in this kind of markets, this kind of days, this audience, try these tag words, let's do an A/B testing and compare the results. We plan the campaign with you for free. So we want the game to succeed because then the user is happy, developer is happy, we are happy. That is the all-win situation.